Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, where today I have a very special guest, George Wilson, and we're going to be talking about stress associated with PEDs, and also we'll cover stress management as well as a bodybuilder in general. So it'd be super cool to delve into this topic with you, George. How are you, my friend?
I am very good. Prep is relatively easy at this point. I can't, yeah, it's weird. It's strange. I'm not used to this. I should be suffering now. I'm only 10 weeks out and I feel on cloud nine, which is not normal for me. But yeah, everything else is all good. I can't complain.
Yeah, do you know what? Actually, for me, like being down this, PED use and assisted athlete, it's such a different prep for me, and I can't get my head around it. Like you say, I'm 7 weeks out, and I almost feel like I should be not going to war is the wrong word, but I feel like I should be in the gutter, like suffering every day, because previous preps, that's what it's been. And it's just getting my head around that. I guess managing the fatigue so much more, working with Tom and understanding that more is the biggest contributor, but also, being assisted, it is such a different prep.
There's a lot of negative adaptations that you're kind of offsetting by going down the enhanced route that you're not having to deal with this time around. I had the same situation with Zoe when she went enhanced for her last competition, and the difference in prep, how she felt, mood, energy wise, it's just a complete changer. And it was almost like she felt bad because she didn't feel like she was, in the right state to be in prep. It was almost like it was too easy. I mean, I could use a better choice of word there because prep is
really hard.
Yeah. But the difference is so significant.
Yeah, I just, on the daily, I say to Matt, I'm like, I feel good. This is not right. But also it's getting to stage day, isn't it? And actually, when you think of it, you should be able to perform as as best you can. And by managing fatigue and having an easier, if we say, prep, then potentially on show day, you're going to feel so much better, be able to perform better. And then you're going to hopefully, get the achievements that you want from it, place, whatever that may be. So, being able to enjoy show day is going to be a big game changer as well. Normally you'll get into show day and you're like, I've survived.
I guess it ties in quite nicely to our topic of conversation today with stress. Like the difference for you in prep from natural to enhanced is the amount of stress you're handling. Obviously, there's going to be some stress coming from performance enhancements, but the difference in what your stress mediation is completely different, and thus it feels so much different, so much easier because of this.
Yeah. I mean, with regards to the stress that can be induced from PED use, potentially we could speak about that first. And, there's so many stories you hear, and part of doing this, I guess, series on the podcast is to up the acknowledgement of what actually, PED use should look like for a safe use model in inverted commas. And, because it's, I get messages on Instagram, I have so many conversations, and, so many people just don't know anything about PEDs, and then there's that potential for the misuse of them. And then if it was to go, onto the use of too much, then, maybe we could speak about what that does to the body and the stress that causes.
Yeah. So firstly, I think defining what stress actually is important, because it doesn't just come from performance enhancements. You can come from natural day-to-day life. Anyway, it's kind of an essential part of life, of being alive, essentially. Now, stress can be kind of categorized into something called allostatic load. It's like a blanket term to cover all the different types of stresses we have. And they can be split into like two subcategories of internal and external stresses. So things that are kind of in your control and things that are outside of your control. Now, PED use kind of slots nicely into the physical stress we would feel on the body during the time of use, but you can have things like mental stress, emotional stress, psychological stress, all that will have some essence of fatigue on the body. When we think about performance enhancement specifically, the main elephant in the room comes back to oxidative stress, which is essentially in chemistry, it's when an oxygen loses an electron, an oxygen molecule loses an electron and it becomes unstable and then has the potential to cause cellular damage. Now, PEDs directly increase oxidative stress, or the production of oxidative stress. So they're referred to as free radicals or reactive oxygen species. And there's a certain amount that we require, again, in day-to-day life, to drive quite a lot of normal metabolic processes within the body. So things like mTOR signaling, which regulates quite a lot of these metabolic processes in cell proliferation, muscle protein synthesis. Too much oxidative stress can cause damage, but too little can hinder mTOR signaling and thus affect how we grow, how we maintain tissue, and can have a direct correlation into our progress in bodybuilding. So it's not quite a case of just how do we stop it or how do we create it, it's how do we regulate it and control it to be, I hate using the word optimal, but to be optimal for each individual. So typically when we see too much signs of oxidative stress, we start to see cellular damage. So within the brain, liver, kidney, heart, essentially any tissue within the body can suffer from cellular damage. Now there's one quite acute visible sign of oxidative stress that we see among bodybuilders, which is acne, which would be cellular damage at the sebaceous glands themselves, which lead to cystic acne, the presence of really quite nasty cysts. I can talk from personal experience, it's something I've had to deal with.
Oh, really?
It's this kind of what sort of symptoms and signs you'll get from oxidative stress comes down to a lot of genetic individuality. So I'm someone who would exhibit quite a high chance of getting acne, obviously by definition of my genetics, which is why I exhibited it quite quickly. But quite a lot of the damage done isn't visible and it isn't easy to pick it apart. Like, how do you know you're getting a lot of neurotoxicity from oxidative stress? You don't. And it could potentially lead to a lot of issues in longevity later on in life, looking at things like multiple sclerosis, dementia, Alzheimer's. And so it's very important as bodybuilders going down the enhanced route that we understand what this does and what it could potentially mean and how do we control it. Now, if we refer back to like natural individuals, oxidative stress, like I said, is a vital part of what we do. And more often than not, nutritional intervention is simply more than enough to keep it in check. So keep the balance between too much and too little. So you look at things high antioxidant foods, so things like cruciferous vegetables, fruit intake, things like dark berries, strawberries, cherries, blueberries, raspberries. But when we go from like that physiological realm into the super physiological, it's sadly not enough of an intervention to keep it in check. We've got such an overproduction of them. We then need to start looking towards over-the-counter supplementation first. So good antioxidants, things like vitamin E, taurine, NAC, green tea extract, all of which will have an effect on oxidative stress totally within the body. But each individual will have like a specific point of the body where it'll have a larger interaction. Like NAC would be fantastic for brain health and controlling oxidative stress there. So there's processes to how we would initially start helping control oxidative stress in a client or in a consult client when they've got exhibiting signs of it or they don't understand how to. The last and final intervention would then be to look at prescription medications after over the counter, things like metformin, melatonin, glutathione, all of which are extremely potent antioxidants, but of course at that point they do come with some cost. So you have to be very careful as to what you're using, when you're using it, how much, and is it really necessary? Yeah. People on like their first cycle are just kind of dipping their toe in the water. They're not going to have typically a huge amount of oxidative stress produced when they're just running, slightly outside of TRT plus. Whereas someone who's trying to, get their pro card, they're going to be running quite a significantly higher milligram per kilogram, respectfully to their risk reward. They're going to need to control these things a lot better. And of course, we always have to go back to that genetic into individual response. Not everyone's going to have the same amount of oxidative stress from using the same compounds. So it's not quite always a blanket, black and white, this is how we correct it. Boom, take it all, you're all good.
Yeah. When you consult with people, you work with clients, do you go through those stages ordinarily? And I guess it depends. If something was to flare up, like if the acne got quite bad or things like that, you could do that quicker. But stuff that we wouldn't notice, organ health, things like this that are affected, is it just a natural progression?
So with most of my enhanced competitors, I'll have a systematic profile of over-the-counter supplements that would be just generally essential for maintenance of health. They're hitting their essential vitamin and mineral daily intake that also carry in a nice amount of antioxidants anyway. This is usually enough to cover most bases. And then we'd obviously look at using things like metformin, telmisartan, to not necessarily just control oxidative stress, but the other processes and mechanisms that metformin and telmisartan are useful for, we'd have them in the stack design anyway. So there's going to be a certain degree already covered in the basis of what you just recommend to most people that go in enhanced.
I use all of those, vitamin E, glutathione as well.
Yeah. So acne, for example, when you start to see acne become prevalent, you'd start increasing your antioxidants, titrating them up slowly. You wouldn't just go from 0 to 100. It's not like jumping, going from a Prius to a Ferrari. You have to be cautious in what you apply, how much you apply, because again, you don't want to turn down mTOR signaling, which could inhibit growing tissue or maintaining tissue. So you do it in an interval of stages of looking to increase over-the-counter supplementation first, and then that's if they don't have the prescription medication in this design already. You can then look to increase some of the prescription medications to control it, and it's a needs analysis of, is this controlling it? Is it getting better? No, let's look to implement the next stage. Let's try and increase X, Y, and Z to try and cut it back in place. And then eventually with acne specifically, the final route is obviously Accutane if it is too far past the point of return, but we avoid that as best as possible.
Yeah, I mean, acne is one of those things associated. When I was first starting out in bodybuilding, if ever I was at a show or at that point where I was just, you know, exploring bodybuilding, if you saw someone with acne, you'd automatically think, oh, they must be on steroids. Yeah. It's like that sort of go-to sign. And I thought, you know, going down the assisted route, would this happen to me? And when I first started out, probably about 6 weeks in, just started getting like bumps across my front of my chest, and then obviously the classic shoulders, and then vitamin E got introduced, glutathione, and we started to look at that. And then even just skincare though, I don't know about you, George, I mean, as a competitor in particular, things like doing your exfoliating every 2 to 3 days, moisturizing daily, all of those things that can easily be missed, especially in a prep when you're tired, you know, things like that. You think, oh God, I don't know if I can find the energy for that, but that will all help as well.
100%. So again, with most things within what we do, they are always multifactorial. So like with acne, yes, it could to some degree be oxidative stress causing it, but you could be making it 10 times worse by just simply keeping, I don't want to say the word poor hygiene, but overlooking those simple little things like scrubbing, exfoliating, cleaning the skin. There was one point I was showering 3 times a day during my treatment, and it significantly makes a difference. Yeah,
it is. There's so many things that go into competing that I guess can be overlooked, and it's with us, you know, personality wise, we are typically driven. We want everything, you know, fast, everything to work linear, everything, you know, do more, get more, but it's not the case. And it's looking at the bigger picture sometimes. And, you know, especially if say you had a breakout the first time, and when you go down the assisted route, it's like you say, do it gradually, but people will go, oh, I'll just go on the highest dose of X, Y, and Z to stop this, but it doesn't always work like that.
No, and in more cases, the shift and change from going from 0 to 100 can actually drive up more stress in the acute setting and actually make the situation worse rather than better. So you're always better taking that low and slow approach with any kind of mediation to try and fix a problem. You can't just go from 0 to 100. It just, it will all backfire.
Yeah, not a good idea. Do you work with any clients, or have you had consults with people that have gone almost too far and then they're trying to sort of take control and come back down from the PED use where they've, you know, taken a high volume?
So like you're talking about coming off the back of a high cycle and then seeing problems arise at the end?
Yeah.
So again, it's that similar thing. When you see the fluctuation change in hormones, that rapid drop in testosterone and estrogen, and how everything manipulates in the body at that time leads to stress. It drives up stress. Everything we do carries some form of stress. So it's important, like I say, a post-show window, you're going to be exhibiting extreme stress and fatigue from the prep itself. And then in that post-show window, it's more so just as, more important than the prep, I personally believe, to nail that health and recovery phase so that you're not driving up even more stress on the body. You're in at a time where you're going to do damage to yourself if you continue pushing, or if you adjust things incorrectly or at too fast a pace.
Yeah, it's the thing is, you know what it's like post-show. You have your sort of meal after your show, you have some food the next day, and suddenly you think, right, I've recovered, I'm going to go and do a training session, you know, I'm on fire. And then you start training and you think, shit, you know, I don't feel good. You know, ordinarily for most of my preps, I've felt that way, but you've got that sort of subconscious telling you you've eaten, you haven't eaten, you know, meals like that for quite some time, you've enjoyed yourself, you should be then training and getting back on it. But it's so important, isn't it, that, you know, especially that first 2 to 4 weeks after a show, and it takes up to, you know, it can take 6 months to recover properly from a prep. It's crazy.
It completely comes down to that each individual and their response to it. I think most people somewhere between, like you said, that 2 to 8 week mark is kind of like an optimal recovery phase where you can nail everything from getting body fat back into a comfortable state, getting all your biofeedback and sleep and health metrics back in check in a good place. But for females, say natural females coming off prep, that window recovery phase is now going to be potentially 6 months, even longer, if they've seen severe suppression of their natural regulating hormones, potentially going into an amenorrheic state. their window of recovery and the amount of stress they have to deal with in that post-show window and phase is going to be a lot more than most.
Yeah, and we've spoke about this on the pod before, where, you know, there is coaches in the industry, unfortunately, that I hear of more and more, that prep people and then they don't care for them after the show. I've even recently had a message on Instagram from a lady that I know, and her coach said, I don't take care of you after, I only prep clients. And it's like, what? You know, if anything, it's that window where you need a coach so much more. The physical and psychological effects of a prep, that post-show period, we spoke about it with how Zoe was after competing. I'm sure she won't mind us, you know, mentioning that, but I can relate to everything you were saying. You know, that mind warp you go through, it's such a scary place.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. Not just the physical side of having a coach there. It's easy to say, right, this is what we need to do. This is why we do it. We've got the data to prove why we need to do it. But it's that psychological battle that, again, it drives up more stress than anything. It's the battle in here that you have to deal with post-show. The constant fluctuations of your hunger signaling, leptin and ghrelin going all over the place, wanting to eat, not wanting to get fat, wanting to live a normal life, wanting to be human, but also wanting to be a bodybuilder. You're just torn in 7 different ways. So it's probably the most important part of the prep itself is the post-show window.
Yeah, and I find, you know, working with people that have reversed out or people in an off season, I was saying to Matt the other day, that's almost one of my like ideal clients, because I love getting stuck into that recovery and repair and then building muscle. It's a really nice phase to work with people and also help them with that psychological side in regards to being able to sit with the scale weight going up, being able to gain tissue and be objective about it, because it is tough.
Yeah, it is. And you have to think about the periodization of your timeline. As if you don't nail the post-show window, you're not going to set yourself up for the best position to potentially grow into an off season. You have to nail it to make the next phase work. In the same way, the off season has to be nailed, especially towards the end, to transition into a comfortable prep.
Yeah, I always find that, I don't know about you, but before I go into prep, I really like to go on holiday, ideally, or, you know, go for a few meals out just for the, I guess, enjoyment. And when I'm in prep, if I was to think, oh, I really like that food, because I've had it, it's almost like I can deal with that. And I'm like, oh, well, I've had it. It's there after I compete. I'm not fussed about it. Whereas if you try and, you know, eke out, you've done your show, you try and eke out being staging, you only get 3-4 months of an off season, which isn't really an off season. Then you're competing again. It's that vicious cycle, and you're never really being able to, you know, curb the food focus, be able to actually enjoy the prep. Whereas having a holiday or something before, I'm like, I am gagging for prep now. It's such a good feeling.
Poor example, it's like, you know, eating loads and loads of all the food you love towards the end of the off season, getting loads of food into you physically hate it, so that when you transition into prep, you're like, oh, thank fuck, I just can't wait to just diet now, I've had enough.
Yeah, it almost comes with experience, that, doesn't it? I mean, it's having done several preps and off seasons now, I'm able to sit with that. I am allowed to enjoy food in an off season. I don't have to track every single thing that I eat, but that's hard in itself, isn't it? You know, if you've gone from bodybuilding is that neurotic behavior to actually thinking, oh, okay, so I can be a bodybuilder, but I can actually go for a meal out.
Yeah. You made a good point about the holiday pre the prep. Something that I did with Zoe during her last prep was we actually took a holiday like midway point. So we did a really, really long prep, and the whole focus for her was, how can we alleviate as much stress as possible during this timeline? Well, let's take longer. Let's be a little bit slower in how we pull off the body fat, and let's implement diet breaks along the way. And let's book a holiday at the halfway point, providing that you're 100% where you need to be.
Yeah,
let's go on the day. Let's take away as much stress as possible. Forget about prep essentially for the week while you're away. Still, obviously keeping on top of macros, nutrition, energy balance, but allowing yourself to have that time to just sit by the pool, relax.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's planned. It is planned with the deload week. We structured this accordingly so that this works. And then when you come back, it's the same thing again. You've got that new lease of life. You feel stress-free, you feel fresh, you're ready to roll and get stuck into that last half.
Yeah, I think that is such a valid point as well. Being able to embrace that you can still live a life when you're even in a prep. You know, automatically people think if you're in prep, you can't do any holidays, you can't go out. But there's ways around it. You don't have to be this sort of robotic just bodybuilder, you can be a partner, you can be, you know, a family member, you can do these things as well, but you just need to adjust it accordingly.
Something that I've done in the past is the typical suffer in silence approach to it. It's like, right, I'm on prep now. It's meant to be hard. I'm meant to isolate myself from the world. I can't go and see friends. I can't go and see family. I've just got to sit here, eat my meals, train, come home. That's it. End of. And the amount of negative stress, again, that added to me from a psychological standpoint was so detrimental that it hindered the fat loss phase and the prep itself massively. This time around, I'm still going and seeing family members. I'm still going out with Zoe's family. And, you know, we went for a roast the other day. Yeah, I didn't have the roast, but I took my meal prep with me and I sat at the table in the restaurant and ate out my Tupperware. But
love that.
It is what it is. They understand what I do and they're just more happy that I'm present. And for me, the release that you get mentally in that stimulation is so beneficial during this time when everything is relatively hard. Normal day-to-day life is hard. So having these little things and moments to still be social and still have those normal human interactions, it helps. It just works perfectly alongside that timeline of the prep. I think it's something that a lot of people still get bogged down into in that Dorian Yates mindset of going in the dark, shadow mode, hood up, don't talk to anyone. You don't need to be negative on prep. This is a choice. Like you chose to do this. You should be trying to smile and enjoy it. It can be a really enjoying process.
Yeah, the point you made there about being present, like when I look back over I think I'm sort of touching on maybe 9 years now of bodybuilding. There's probably 6 years of that I wasn't even present in my life outside of bodybuilding, and probably for the most part of the actual bodybuilding, because it's wake up, do your posing practice, do your training, your steps, your food prep, and working a full-time job around that. And then I think I've missed so many opportunities almost. I don't dwell on it, but it's a shame in a sense, because I wasn't allowing myself to enjoy anything other than the kicks that I get from bodybuilding.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. And it's surrounding yourself with like-minded people as well, isn't it?
Of course, like we have to remember when we get to like 4-6 weeks out, yeah, realistically, you probably don't have the energy in abundance to go and do these things like go and see family members and friends. But at that point, you know, if you spend the last 20 weeks or whatever still making that effort, you can sacrifice it in the last few, because you are that drained, you are that mentally tired, physically tired, emotionally tired, that you can't really give that energy away, and you do need to reserve it. So there will be a point when you might need to just kind of switch off from everyone, but it should only be in that last few weeks if you need to. You know, you're going to get so much more from it.
Yeah, 4 to 6 weeks for me is about where 6 weeks I sort of hit that point where it's like, okay, it's more the body fatigue. I guess psychologically I'm okay to still pour energies into other things outside of bodybuilding, but then I think the body fatigue almost outweighs that, and then it becomes that I can't spend these energies on the things that I would have before. But like you say, you know, Zoe's family, people understand if you're open and honest about what you're doing. You know, and if you can do that. And when we saw each other at the show a few weeks ago, like it did dawn on me, because I don't really see bodybuilders living down south, there's no one around, and it's like it was just so nice to have a talk about the stuff that bodybuilders talk about. It's so cool. And it really is, it's such a big thing for me to be around people that understand it as much as possible. But you know, even if you can stagger that, so like FitX is coming up, so I'll do that, and that will give me a kick. I can see my coach Tom and things like this, and then, you know, you can go to posing workshops, you can do all of these things, but you have got to put the feelers out, you know, and actually get in contact with people. It's being open and honest as well, isn't it? And being able to accept how you feel.
Yeah, it's quite nice. Like I said, with like-minded individuals, even when you are feeling down in the dumps, you're feeling a bit shit and have no motivation or energy to try and make that social effort, you can still talk to these people, because even if you're being as blunt and as boring as hell, they kind of get it. And because they understand, you get that sense of comfort in talking to them. So the conversation or going and seeing them isn't as physically demanding, because you don't have to feel like you've got to force the effort and try and be Mr. Cheerful, but they just get it. So you can still have like a good conversation, and just being there is enough. Yeah,
it's super, super cool. And it gives you a little, almost a burst of energy to do another block of your prep and then keep pushing through. It's such a nice feeling. When you mentioned about going on holiday and factoring in a deload for that week, I think that's definitely something that's a big bit of advice that people could take on board, because deloading, it can be in several different ways. For a start, a lot of people don't deload, which is a relevant point. But you can do it where you don't train and you just do your normal expenditure, or you can do your like pump sessions. How do you sort of structure deloads? Does it depend on who it's for?
It depends on situation. Like the most optimal way to deload would be to still train through the deload, do an active deload, and set parameters for your intensity, your amount of sets performed, how close are you trained to failure as such, and titrate it down across the week. But that's not to say you can't completely take a full deload and just keep your expenditure nice and high. And in some instances, it comes from more like a mental perspective of where a client is or where someone is on that timeline. At some point, it may actually be more beneficial for them to actually just step away from the gym for a week to relieve stress, go and just do some external activities outside of the gym for 5 minutes, give themselves a mental breather before returning back to it. It may make it a little bit more challenging when they get back in the gym for the first week, but we're talking 1% realistically.
Yeah. And if you are going away with being assisted, it's also considering, can you take things with you, or you can backload things like tests, the day before you go, or things that people should hopefully get advice from their coach about, being able to manage that, because that could also give you stress, thinking I'm not able to take my PEDs like I normally would. All of these things that start to play on your mind and you worry, and then consequently you can end up inducing more stress going away.
There could also be some essence of physical stress and physiological stress if you aren't taking what you need to be. If you suddenly go on holiday and you can't take your growth hormone, you can't take your metformin, telmisartan with you, and all the other PEDs that we have, if you go away for a week or 10 days, is that going to hinder progress? Is that going to drive up more physical stress? Are we actually doing a negative here? So it has to kind of work in with what you're doing. It still has to work with bodybuilding. So I always pick, if I do something like that, if I go on holiday, it has to be somewhere where I can take for personal use. I know it's a Class C banned substance, but the majority of the countries around the world now still have the same regulations. If you're personal use, crack on, knock your socks off. So just checking the legislation, making sure that where you're going, you're not going to get penalised or fined or worse for taking these things abroad. Just kind of keeping as in your routine but out of your routine as possible, if that makes sense.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Again, who you go on holiday with is going to contribute massively to, getting up, go and do your steps, being active throughout the day, things like this. When I was married before, my husband wasn't interested in any of that. It would be, if we're on holiday, it's sloth mode, and that would be so isolating and stressful for me. It was like, why am I even going on holiday?
Takes away from the fun of it. It makes it a negative instead of a positive, so it doesn't actually contribute intuitively to what you're doing. It just hinders it. And you it's meant to help you, I guess, adhere in a sense, because you're being able to take yourself out, have a bit of time where you're like, okay, how much have I done of my prep? Where am I at? How am I feeling? What's next? When I get back, I need to do X, Y, and Z. But you don't have to take all of your activity out and everything out that you normally do. All of those things, the ticking boxes that we do as bodybuilders is crazy, isn't it? It's stupid. Honestly, we must look so strange to the rest of the world.
I get these out of body experiences because I've just handed my notice in at my job, but where I work at a leisure centre, it's working with Gen Pop, and nothing against Gen Pop, of course, but when you talk about what you do as a bodybuilder to someone that knows nothing about it, I have these moments where I'm like, this is it's such a polar opposite to what I would have been before bodybuilding and what a lot of people do in their day-to-day life. But when you're in it, you think that, because you're in a circle and most people you associate with do bodybuilding, all of these terms we have, you almost assume that everyone would know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's often nowhere near the case. They don't understand it in its entirety, and they think you're strange and wrong almost for doing it.
And then it's like, okay, well, that's quite cool, because that means I'm not normal. And I like that bodybuilding is, like you say, it's a choice, but it's a choice it's away from the norm, like completely away from the norm.
Yeah, it's still kind of got that essence of culture to it, where it's a little bit niche, and we're a little collective group, we all stick together kind of.
Yeah, it's so cool. How is Zoe getting on now? So how long ago did you compete?
Currently, she's kind of, I've kind of classed her as like a hobby builder now. So Zoe, it's a very different process in prepping. She doesn't do this for like a exterior goal of where she wants to go and compete in. She does it simply because she enjoys it. She likes to challenge herself, get in shape, and she loves musical theatre. When she was younger, she's a dance teacher, runs a dance academy, so she loves being on stage. It really suits her. But for her, juggling, running a business, having employees, life, social life balance, bodybuilding, competing, it's an awful lot to juggle. And as you know, when you go on prep, things have to be pulled down on the priority list. So for her, I think, what's the date today? June, March, April, May. We're about 3-4 months post-show now.
Yeah.
So for us, it was that transition away from bodybuilder Zoe back into hobby builder Zoe, who trains for enjoyment, eats for enjoyment, eats what she wants, essentially. Basically, I'm sure you've heard of Dina Lizzie's informed eating. That literally is exactly what I've taught her coming out the post-show window, which is a fantastic stress mediator. Actually, post-show, that first week or 2 weeks can be absolutely a nightmare. The moment you see the scale change, alarm bells ring off, and your emotional viewpoint of yourself goes out the window. You suddenly look shit, even though when you look the same 3 weeks prior to competing, you was on cloud 9, like, oh yeah, I look sick, I look shredded. That shift and change, you look identical in them two situations, but the mental viewpoint is completely changed. But one thing we did this time that was not really very orthodox, the minute we stepped off stage, we took the sword home and we jumped on a plane and went to Santorini.
Mate.
No tracking, no food management. She didn't actually train at all for the entire week. And I know and watched how she struggled with her old coach post-show. And I made a decision here where I was like, right, let's just remove her from this environment entirely. Let's take her away from those normal environmental triggers that cause her to binge eat, feel shit. Let's put her in a nice new environment, some novel stimulus going around, somewhere where she wants to explore. So nice high expenditure, some good vitamin D, UV exposure, and just relax.
Yeah. It's super cool, isn't it? So is her view to compete again?
At some point, she will step on stage again. She actually said to me the other day, she'd potentially look at just focusing on her business for a fair few years and maybe come back as like the lower tier masters.
Yeah. Oh, sick. How old is she?
She is 25 now, so you know, still 10 years away from like the 35 and over at minimum. But yeah, like I said, she's not got goals like we would do in bodybuilding. It's just simply a hobby and enjoyment, so she's not really too concerned. She does it. It's a hard battle. It's a very hard battle with what she wants to do. Like after winning the sword, taking the overall, she was on like cloud 9, and she was like, right, let's smash this off season. Let's do this. Let's go. Boom. Like running all these ideas for her head. And I just knew it was, I didn't really get to jump at it too much as a coach. Like if a client said that to you, you'd be like, fucking yeah, let's go. So I took it with a pinch of salt because I was like, I know what's coming next. I know how our brain works. I see this. It's same with all clients. You know how they fluctuate with their moods and emotions. So when she had all this big hype, I was like, I'm not expecting anything here, because when she comes back to reality, I know what's going to happen. You know, she's going to drop back down. She's going to want to focus on her actual priorities, which are a business and social life and enjoying herself. So
yeah, it's a tough one when you've got the goal of competing, and then it's almost like a sense of purpose is removed overnight. And then you wake up the next day and it doesn't matter what you've achieved, how you've placed, whatever, you still have this like, shit, my goal is gone.
Yes.
And you know what it's like in off season, you know, things like your interaction on social media, your interaction, you know, in general, it changes because you're just ticking boxes. You're just, you know, you're gaining, and you know, your photos are going to be very different because you're gaining weight rather than losing weight. And it's that the psychological battle and the stress that you find yourself in. And like you mentioned there, Zoe, with her coach previously post show, that is massive. It's massive. And the people who listen to the pod, you know, get in touch all the time about horror stories with coaches after a show, and it's just, it hurts your heart. It's so, you know, it's horrible. And being able to help Zoe through that and now coach her must be so fulfilling for you.
Yeah, no, it was a completely unplanned decision. I've watched other people coach their partners, and I saw the stress that brings to a relationship. And I had no intention of doing it. But after looking through her blood work that I made her get, that her coach didn't, I was like, something needs to be done here. I need to step in. So I had no intention of actually coaching her for competitions or off season or anything. It was just, let me fix what's going on hormonally, and then you can do whatever you please. And it just rolled from there. Yeah, that dynamic is quite hard.
Yeah.
very hard to switch between Coach George, boyfriend George, or fiance George. And on prep, you have to turn off the emotion. Like Joe taught me, one of the best things Joe's ever taught me is when to show emotion and when to completely detach it.
Okay.
And sort of like last 12 weeks, you know, Zoe suffering, your partner suffering. You don't want to see her feeling like shit. You don't want to see her moody and upset. But sadly, the do's got to get done.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to just go, right, boyfriend George is going in the back for a minute. He's taking the back seat. Coach George is taking over. And that in and of itself, like being able to switch on your emotional support when it's needed. Like I was doing check-ins to her exactly the same as I would a client. Like none of that standing look in front of me shit, because realistically coaches actually can't see a week-to-week change with their eyes unless they've got a photographic memory.
Yeah.
But that being said, I would do her Loom response exactly the same as I would a client. She'd check in the same. We wouldn't talk about it any other time of the day. So once that was done and Coach George was done,
yeah,
right, come here, now cry to me. It's all good. I'll stroke your hair where you feel better. Let's go.
Is that something that she's going to replicate for your prep when things get harder? I know it's different with male and female, that relationship in a sense, but it must be hard for her as a partner as well when this, you know, your prep goes on and this gets harder.
My big thing is being a bit more extroverted with her. So as just a human being, I am quite quiet. Like if I'm suffering with things or doing stuff, I'll just keep trying to plug away and fix it myself or do things myself. Always have been like that. So for me, it's making sure I actually voice to her like, hey, I am actually feeling a bit stressed right now. I'm actually struggling a little bit with workload, managing prep, diet fatigue, mental fatigue. Like, can we just have a little bit of help here? Because normally I would just, nah, it's all good. I'm all good. Yeah, let's go. That's fine. Yeah, I can cope.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Particularly dying in the back.
Is there certain things that you've pulled in more as your prep goes on to manage your stress?
So for me, it comes from, I've got all of my parameters in like the physiological side of things with my supplementation, my stack design from PED use is set up to negate as much stress physically. So, you know, even looking at things like pancreatic health and using basal actin insulin, I'm not using that on prep, but it's a good note to make that not all performance enhancements are driving up stress on the body. Some of them are used to alleviate stress. So like a basal actin insulin will help your beta cell function from deceasing it or becoming less efficient over time with excessive carbohydrate intake. Metformin brings down oxidative stress and helps to improve insulin sensitivity. Telmisartan is not driving up stress, it's reducing or blocking angiotensin 2 at the receptor site, so it's protecting your heart from internal growth of the left ventricle. Like there's lots of mediations within our stack design that are going to control stress as opposed to create stress. But for me, it's more existential and what I do on a day-to-day that is making the biggest difference. So keeping my routine kind of in the off season towards the end, Zoe was calling me a bit of a psycho because I was nailing my routine at the end, getting up at 5 o'clock, almost ready for prep. So I was getting up, doing my steps, even though I didn't need to, like not loads, but doing some, coming back, stretching, reading a book for half hour before I'd even start the day at 7, keeping on top of routine. And then in the evening, making sure that in the past, especially in the off season, I was working till like 10, 11 o'clock at night sometimes, making sure that come 8 o'clock, everything I need to do is done for the day. That is when I switch off. That is when I relax, calm down, do whatever I need to do in the evening and just unwind.
Yeah, it's such a nice feeling to do that, isn't it? But again, being a bodybuilder, you don't feel like you should have, you know, in the past, I think, well, I shouldn't have chill out time. I should be doing something because otherwise I'm not contributing to my goal of competing at my best. But it's not that do more, is it?
No, in that essence, doing more sometimes hinders the progress and makes it worse. So you are better off making sure your recovery is optimal. That's going to relieve as much stress as possible. Sleep is something that's so overlooked. And on prep, sadly, it's something that will downregulate over time, especially in the enhanced world. We're using lipolytics, so much stimulants. That parasympathetic nervous system response of epinephrine and epinephrine or adrenaline, whichever part of the world you're in, that being driven up is going to lead to a poorer sleep or poorer sleep quality, less sleep time. You know, it's like in prep, you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, your eyes are like, right, let's go. We've got to start.
Ready.
Yeah, I don't want to, but I'm here. So trying to find ways of it. I mean, supplementation is how I currently mediate my sleep. So using things like L-theanine to bring down anxiety and set the parasympathetic nervous system tone pre-bed, melatonin, having a hot shower or bath sort of like an hour before bed. It's just all those little things. They seem really insignificant, but they really do tally up. UV light exposure. I'm not one of them that wears like the blue light glasses, but I will put my phone down and electronics out the way for a good hour before bed, because it does affect your sleep quite massively. So then little things that aren't necessarily physiological that you can do within your day are going to massively alleviate stress, and just trying to get as much sleep as possible is one of the best things you can do.
Yeah, even if when you're in prep, you know, you wake up several times in the night, or, you know, wake up early, you can still stay in bed and almost see it as rest.
Yeah.
You know, you don't, even if you can't get back to sleep, you can just take that time to be able to rest and just let the body try and recover as much as possible during those periods. It's a massive change for me with when I increased my dosage of in the morning of Clen, the change in how I feel and how much longer those stimulants last, being able to have those times in the evening where I try and just sit back, because you're so stimmy for hours in the morning, and that goes into the afternoon. And it's also things like, you know, curbing your caffeine and all of these things that you should consider as well.
Yeah, which is normally as you go into prep, caffeine goes up, 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 up. And it's the complete opposite of really what you want. But my ruling is kind of cut off by about 3 to 4 p.m. Now, usually like the half-life of caffeine is somewhere between 6 to 8 hours. Yeah. But somewhere around 3 to 4, so I know when it comes to bedtime, it's not making that much of a difference on my ability to sleep or relax.
Yeah. When we were at the show, were you saying that you had taken Tren out?
No.
Oh, okay. I was saying to Matt, what was it that me and George were talking about with Tren? Because all of those stimulants and things that contribute to how you feel, and I guess your response to them as well, and what the options are around stimulants.
That exact conversation was with DMP.
Ah, okay.
For the use of a different type of fat burner that I hadn't used before. Now, I'm quite sensitive to clenbuterol, so same as you, I would start at 20 micrograms and I would feel like a shaking leaf, like a shitting dog. It's hilarious.
It's so weird.
The minute you titrate up, I see it in my biofeedback data. The Oura ring tells me my resting heart rate instantly starts shooting up. My sleep goes really bad. So for me, I try and keep it as low as possible. And one of the things that we implemented a little while ago was, hey, instead of just titrating the clen up to drive the effect of further increasing lipolysis and fat burn, let's try utilizing a small amount of DMP, which is going to work on a different pathway, but not carry that same central nervous system fatigue that's affecting your recoverability, your sleep, or just how you feel. Inevitably, it all eventually did go up because that's prep. It needs to be done. But in that split moment, it did offer some release from it for a while before it then needed to go up.
Yeah, I mean, are you at this point now, are you as high as your stimulants will go in prep, or is there more room for increasing?
There's always room to increase. Like we always start, you can always take more drugs. No, we obviously start like the minimum effective dose and we titrate up accordingly. So there is still some movement. Ideally, we wouldn't need to make the movement. And looking at where I am in reflection to the goal and also my current anabolic load, there's a lot more movement in other areas within nutritional intake, my daily step count, PEDs, without looking at the lipolytics to further drive that process. So we're in a pretty comfortable point. Now, this is as high as I'd really like it to stay.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you get it with trying to do things like work on your laptop and things that require concentration. I find that window of being quite stimmed up, it's actually quite hard to be able to maintain that focus and just be able to get stuck in. It's almost like you'd think stimulants would help you get stuck in, but I find actually the exposures, you know, the highest it's going to go for me in prep, and it's quite hard to steady the thoughts.
Yes, 100%. So there's like a little window of time for about 2 to 3 weeks when I start a deficit, where I all of a sudden feel so productive. I'm on point. Work is a dream. Like I'm flying through everything. I can't stop. It's all running really productively. And then all of a sudden the fatigue crosses over, but you still got the stims in. And if not, they're getting more. And now it becomes a hindrance. Now it's affecting work. Now I'm too stimmed, too focused on one thing. And it's so much going on. Yeah,
it's a very strange feeling. Like, I guess it's sometimes hard to quantify what it feels like if you haven't done this before. It's like an internal shake, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And shake on the brain as well. It's like, and you're trying to have that focus to be able to do your normal tasks. Like even, I'm doing food prep and I'm thinking, I'm shaking, trying to put my Tupperwares down and I'm thinking, oh God, I've got to do this next. And it's hard to steady the thoughts. And that again is something that, having a coach that you can be open and honest about these daily things that especially if you're going down the assisted route for the first time, it's a very out of body experience compared to what you would have done before.
Yeah, very, very novel, very foreign.
Is is caffeine something that you monitor yourself and with clients?
I tell people realistically, do not consume over like a gram of caffeine a day. Like that's the top limit. I'd rather you weren't even getting anywhere near that. But everyone's got their own individual response to caffeine tolerance that builds up over time. I don't recommend having anything more than 400 or 500 in a day, but if you handle it and you can, then, you know, as long as you're not going past a gram, we're not going to see those potentially really bad side effects.
Yeah, it's not till you sometimes consult with someone or talk to someone more that you'll say, how many coffees are you on a day? And some people it's like 5 or 6.
Yeah,
you know. And also I had a conversation with someone on the gram again the other day, where most of my life is, and we were talking about, because Tom introduced a second coffee for me, so that just came in because he was like, oh, how's your caffeine going? And I was like, 1 coffee a day, tea, which is, you know, lowering caffeine, and a Monster on training days. And he was like, you can add your second coffee if you like. And I'm like, yes. And then when I was speaking to this person on Instagram, she was like, oh, you know, is it because of the calories in it? And it was like, oh no, it's actually trying to monitor my stimulants and my caffeine. And she was like, oh, okay. So I don't know if, you know, many coaches delve into that.
There's a plausible reason with enhanced individuals to utilize caffeine alongside certain performance enhancements, things like clenbuterol, yihimbine, or oral steroids like Anavar, and that caffeine will offer synergy alongside these compounds and give you a little bit more bang for your buck, essentially. So if I put someone on orals, I may say to them, right, take this at this time pre to training within a certain window, but have it alongside 100 mg of caffeine, 200 mg of caffeine, things like that. But like total daily intake is not something I'm particularly too fussed on until we get to sort of closing in on peak week. We want to be able to utilize caffeine to drive diuresis and things like that. So we can't have someone, you know, hounding the caffeine, leading right into the last stages of prep.
Yeah, for sure. I actually do the same with regards to placing it. So in the morning, I do a fasted walk. I have my growth and stimulants before, so clen and yihimbine, go for my fasted walk and have a coffee with that. And then I come back and then I have my food, and then I do the LCART fem test and then crack on with my day. But that fasted walk for me, I've never done really fasted stuff that's been implemented as a must, as it were. It was sometimes I get up and be like, oh, I'll go and do my cardio fasted out of choice. But now it's like, for me, the benefit of doing that is massive, because I understand I have the benefits of the growth and having the stimulants on an empty stomach. And, you know, I do 4,000 steps. It's going to far outweigh my discomfort for 40 minutes.
Yeah, 100%. This is the thing when you talk about natural people and enhanced, when they say the debate on fasted cardio, is it better for you, is it not? It literally makes no difference for a natural person to do fasted cardio or non-fasted cardio. You'll still burn the same amount of calories, still the same expenditure. It comes down to like a time restraint thing. Do you have time to get it done in the morning? Well, hey, great, it might work for you there then. Perfect, get it done. With enhanced individuals that are using things specifically like growth hormone or yihimbine, growth hormone in its fasted state will upregulate lipolysis when it's not present with insulin. So you want to do that in a fasted state to really maximize that lipolytic property of growth hormone. Otherwise, there wouldn't be much point in doing it somewhere else in the day.
Yeah, I think that also outlines, you know, if people are listening and they're not getting that tuition from their coach, you know, it's maybe questioning that and looking into that a bit more, because this is what a coach is for. We've said this before on the pod. We had a guest on and we were talking about you're paying for a service. So if you want something for that service, then you should ask for it. Whereas I feel like I've done it in the past. When you get a coach, you almost feel like you should be like, oh, I don't want to bother them too much. You know, I don't want to ask any questions. And it's like, no, you need to squash that. If you were paying for someone to come and fix your boiler, you'd be there like, have you done it? Are you doing it like this? you know?
100%.
And if it didn't work, you'd be like, you either come back or you give me my money back.
Yeah, completely.
But it's this, I don't know. I don't know if you come across people that have worked with previous coaches.
I mean, me myself, my first coach was very much that. I felt that pressure that, you know, I get my check-in time once a week and whatever he says, that's it. Like, I don't want to message him. I don't want to bother him. He's doing his job. I'm all good. I've just got to do as I'm told. It's really not the case. And something I try and drive with my own coaching, and obviously being a part of Flex, one of our biggest mantras is that we're not just here to tell you what to do. We're here to educate you so that one day you don't need us. If you choose to have us for adherence, then that's great. Like, we'll happily keep working towards whatever goals you set. But the idea is that we want to give you the tools to be able to manage this from a lifestyle coaching perspective anyway, to carry on doing what you do. And even in the enhanced competitors, or just competitors in general, the goal is still to educate the client. It's not just to monkey see, monkey do. It needs to be a learning process. You need to be able to, I think as a coach, we get kind of bogged down in the two camps of like experience and science, but I think there has to be a middle ground here where we know why we do what we do with the clinical literature and backing of what we do, but we also have practical experience and understand that this doesn't always translate into the physical here, and we have to kind of mediate the two together and be that blend of educated but also experienced, and be able to apply that to a person.
Yeah.
You get those coaches that are just all experienced because they know that this works. They'll continue to do so without understanding what they're doing, or potentially what damage they're doing, more importantly.
Yeah. Do you get clients or coach? I guess you work with other coaches as well. You work with Dean and Lizzie, but do you get people that have had coaches in the past and they find it hard for you to be able to be that person that they can feed back to and give advice?
Yeah. Big time. It's something that happens with trust and open conversation. I find I have a little setup where I offer all my clients free coaching calls. So if you're one of my clients, if there's something you want to dive into in more detail that required more than your 20-minute check-in response, book it in. We can sit down for half hour or an hour slot, depending on how long you need. So we can go through this in as much detail as possible. The problem also, I mean, I've come across this myself, is there's a barrier between understanding the science and not spewing jargon onto the client, and trying to make them understand it in as simplest way as possible, but not oversimplifying it to the point it's then wrong. It's finding that middle ground there, and it requires a little bit more effort than just I'm going to tell you the science now, because it's going to go over their head. They don't have a clue half of what you're talking about, and that can be quite intimidating for a client. It can be really, really intimidating, and then they will just go, right, I'm gonna shut the doors now. I don't want to ask any more questions because I don't have a fucking clue what you just said.
Yeah, it's, as a coach, it's so important for me to be passionate and care about my clients. This isn't an ego competition, and it's like you say, it's not a chance to just give verbal diarrhea because you know a lot about a certain subject. It's trying to bring yourself to the level that the client's at, for them to understand this fully, and even asking questions saying, do you understand that? Okay, is there anything else we need to delve into? It's not a competition who knows more and what you can peacock to them. It should be that,
the essence of trying to, it almost feels like they're trying to show off sometimes.
Yeah. So at the moment, what are your motivations with the coaching side of things? Are you taking on more clients? Where are you at?
So we are slowly reaching capacity with my Flex clients now, which is fantastic. It's picked up quite quickly since being with them. I'm obviously fighting to an extent the same way some of the Physique Collective coaches are, that, when people apply for the Physique Collective, they're usually applying for Joe. Now, I'm new in Flex Success and I haven't got much scope, across social media and everything yet. It is still building. But when people look at Flex Success for comp prep, they instantly think Dean. So I'm having to kind of navigate my way through that. But it was expected. It is expected. But it's slowly picking up. I've got, a nice enough to say I'm comfortable now.
Yep.
And going into next season, I'm very, very hopeful.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very good season. The caliber of athletes and the work I'm now handling is much more fulfilling than previously. And again, nothing against lifestyle coaching. I have nothing against them. I really have massively enjoyed working with the lifestyle people that I have since I started coaching. But being able to work with my passion, which is bodybuilding coaching, and I always caveat this with, I am a coach first. I'm a bodybuilder second. So I always put what I do in the back burners for coaching, and I don't have those big goals in mind of Olympia, pro cards or whatever. I want to take someone there. I want to make someone a pro, and I want to take someone to the Olympia. That's the forefront of what it is. So being with Dean and Lizzie now on Flex, it's given me a huge step up the ladder and an avenue now to start doing that. And it's actually within touching distance to start taking these people to these places. And it's amazing. It really is. And like, Dean and Lizzie are absolutely fantastic humans. They are the best.
I know, they're just two legends. Like, you know, being around them and seeing what they do, it's, you know, it's really nice to just meet down to earth people. And that's what I think the Physique Collective, you know, all of these connections, a lot of them for all of us has come from that being at the sort of helm of it. And we are all very similar in the way we think and what we want to offer our clients and what we want to, you know, when we're competing, it's about empowering each other rather than competing against each other within a friendship group.
100%. Yeah, we're all there to support each other. We're all on our own separate individual paths. There's no competition between us unless you're on stage with your mate. But, you know, it's all about mutually helping one another. Like the Physique Collective, Flex Success, there's a reason why Dean, Joe, Lizzie all get on so well. It's because we've all got very, very similar beliefs, maybe not the same mindsets or personalities, but we all have that similar belief of what we want to do within the industry and how we want to help the industry, not just be the top guy. Or
yeah, it's not a competition against each other, it's about helping each other. And, you know, even things like sharing, if someone comes to you and it's a specialist reason and it's something that you feel like they could have a consult with someone else more about, you know, it's so nice to be able to refer and know that someone's in safe hands rather than try and do it all yourself as a coach and be out of your depth. It's, you know, such an important thing within our industry as well. So if anyone wanted to reach out to you, whether it's to look at consult or coaching or just any topics we've covered today, if there was some interest, would it be Instagram that would be the best place?
So for general conversation, so just a couple of questions here or there that don't require like, you know, a huge level of detail, guys, feel free to DM me. I always try to get back to as many people as possible, but if you get lost in my message requests, it may be a delay under the, hey, gain 5k followers shit. When it comes to my coaching services, you can see all of what I offer through the Flex Success website, or you can click the quick link in my bio on Instagram, or coincidentally on the Flex Success page, you can click there, quick link there, and it'll take you through to everything that I offer as a coach. Primarily, I am advertised as a comp prep coach now. Yep. So I am very limited on clients that I handle as lifestyle people, but consultation service is still optional and still available. So for those people that want my help or need, you know, not quite the whole commitment to full coaching, you can book in intermittent calls with me. We can go through whatever it is you need to talk about, whether it's within nutrition, training, PED, PED advice. The majority of my consultation service seems to be going along the lines of health consultations, looking at blood work, echoes, and performance enhancement bases. But we still can talk through nutritional training stuff, all of the more basics.
Okay, cool. And what's your Instagram handle?
It is, I changed it recently actually.
Yeah, because I messaged your old one, didn't I? And I was like, oh, this is not you.
Yeah, no, well, with the change over to Flex, my Instagram handle is flexcoach_George. It was quite an emotional moment for me because GW Physique was my brand, it was me, and it was something I worked to for many years to build up. Yeah, and letting that go was a positive thing, massively positive, but it still had a bit like it's gone.
Yeah, it is strange that, migration over to whatever you change, you know, when you build those, I guess you get that emotional connection, like to prep, you know, that's your identity. And it's like, oh, it needs, but it, you know, again, looking at our topic today, it's the stresses, controlling what you can control, not controlling your uncontrollables, but also being able to be a bit more open. And, you know, there's so many different routes you can take with stress management, with fatigue management, with your PED use, you know, and it's trying to accept advice, being able to, I guess it all boils down to being able to be adaptable and open to tuition rather than I do it this way, that's how I do it.
Completely.
Well, thank you for coming on today, George. It's been awesome, and hopefully we will get you back on the pod again, but really appreciate all of your advice today and your time.
More than welcome, Sarah, anytime.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it.
See you later, guys.
See you later.